What's one of the biggest mistakes people make prepping their emergency food storage? Stay tuned to find out and learn one way I avoid it. Hey guys, it's Jara with Wicked Prepared. Welcome back to the channel. We all know why it's so important to have an emergency food storage. Most of us, probably all of us, are going to face a situation at some point where we have to rely on the food in our home. Whether it's the aftermath of a big storm or a natural disaster, something more personal like an illness or injury that keeps us housebound, or a job loss that decimates our food budget, or countless other scenarios. Many people, when they find themselves actually having to rely on their emergency food storage, they come to the realization that while they may have lots of food stored, in the heat of the moment, they can't actually figure out how to combine it into a decent meal they'll actually want to eat. One solution I use for my family is something I call meals in a bag or emergency meal kits. These are just what they sound like. They're shelf-stable bags containing all the necessary ingredients to make a complete meal, right down to and including any water needed to prepare the meal. The meal kit I'm making today is a little bit of a different twist on a classic Italian dish. It's a chicken parm soup, and it's so delicious. Let's get started and I'll show you how easy it is to make. These are the ingredients for this meal. I've got a 28-ounce can of Keystone chicken here. I've also got a 28-ounce can of crushed tomatoes. I've got a regular 15-ounce can of tomato sauce. And this is a can of media crema, which is like basically a canned heavy cream. It makes a great substitute for heavy cream and recipes. I've got a 32-ounce, so 4 cups, carton of chicken broth. Here I've got, this is a pint jar, so this is filled with pasta. And let's see, I used the radiatore pasta, so any short, stubby little pasta shape would work. So I just filled it up. I didn't really measure, but it should be about 2 cups. And then right here, I've got 1 cup. This is a half pint jar. So I've got 1 cup of freeze-dried mozzarella cheese. I have got my seasonings. And what I've done here is I've just taken a little baby food jar. This is the little teeniest baby food jar. It's the perfect size for this if you happen to have any around. And I've added a tablespoon of minced freeze-dried garlic. And then I've added, this is a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of pepper, and 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning. And that makes my little seasoning pack for my meal. Now, if you don't have baby food jars around, you can use something like a tiny mason jar like this. This is a 1/4 pint size. You could use something like a little Mylar bag like this that you could seal up. You could certainly use a small Ziploc if you wanted to. I try to do mine in jars because I know that that's going to keep my stuff fresher for longer. So it'll have a longer shelf life the entire meal, and I know it'll protect it from critters. So that's why I like to use a jar. I have got some Parmesan cheese. Now this is from the Dollar Tree. This is the small container that they sell. You can see it's only about 2.5 ounces. This is real Parmesan cheese, as opposed to their larger size container that is full of fillers and it's not real cheese. You don't want that. But this is also perfect for meals in a bag because it's just a small amount of Parmesan cheese. So it's good for just a meal or two. And then I've got a bag of croutons. This is going to be topping for the soup. And you can use any kind of croutons that you want here, any flavor. I've got cheese and garlic. Any kind of seasoned Italian-style croutons will work for this recipe. One thing I like to do with my bags is I like to stick these. These are self-adhesive CD pockets that I stick on the bags so that I can put a piece of paper or a card in here with the name of the dish, and then on the back of the paper or card I can put the cooking instructions, and I even put the ingredients there because, you know, once you use the contents of the bag and prepare the meal, you can go ahead and fill it back up with those same ingredients and have that meal right back on the shelf. The other thing I like to do is use my sticky chalkboard labels to put the name of the dish here on this end. I think it looks nice when I stand these up on the shelf. I can see the name here. It looks nice and uniform. Then when I pull the bag down off the shelf, I've got my cooking instructions right here. But you could do this any way you want. I will put a link to all these things that I use down in the description below the video because I do get a lot of questions about it. But you could use any type of bag or container that you wanted. I have done this in Dollar Tree gift bags. I have done it in large 2-gallon Ziplocs. I know that some people will do it in shoebox, little plastic totes if the ingredients fit. Lots of different ways that you could do this. I really like these bags because they do have this flat bottom. with this little cardboard support in it, so they stand up really nicely on the shelf, like better than a Ziploc bag would. And honestly, even though these are sold by like 50 or 100 packs on Amazon, so it seems expensive, I'm pretty sure it's probably actually cheaper per bag than buying those Dollar Tree gift bags, one or two bags at a time. But you can do whatever works for you. And you don't have to attach the recipe any special way. You could just write it or print it out and slip it inside the bag. All right, let's get these in the bag. I'm going to start with my chicken broth, my crushed tomatoes, my chicken, my tomato sauce, my jar of pasta, my can of media crema, my jar of mozzarella cheese, my can of Parmesan, my seasonings, and my croutons. And now this very full bag is ready to go on the shelf. Or in this case tonight, I'm going to actually cook this up and show you how this delicious soup turns out. Before I get started on the recipe, I do need to start refreshing this mozzarella cheese. I need to add some water to this so that this can become like fresh mozzarella, so that it will melt. So it's not going to be freeze-dried anymore. Now, a cup of cheese like this really only takes about 3 tablespoons of water. If I had more room in my bag, I would have put this in a larger jar and left some extra space, because it would be great to be able to really tumble it around with the water. I may end up having to put this into something different, so including a Ziploc bag in the bag to be able to rehydrate this in would be a good choice. But I'm going to see if I can do it right in the jar. And so I'm just going to go ahead and pour the water. I'm going to pour it on kind of slowly, and then I'm going to put the lid on and give it a little bit of a shake. See if I can get it to tumble around a little bit, even though there's not a lot of extra space in this jar. Put on the rest of the water. Now, I don't like to overdo it with the water, because I don't like it when the water does not all get absorbed and it leaves some liquid in the bottom, just because I feel like that might take some of the nutrition or some of the flavor away from the cheese if I don't use it. But in a recipe like this, I could just pour that extra liquid right into my soup, and it would just add a little bit of extra creaminess, a little bit of extra flavor. So it would be just fine. So if I feel like I need more water, I'll add a little bit more. But it does not take much for freeze-dried cheese. But this is a product that I'm super thankful for, because we love cheese. We love Mexican dishes and Italian dishes that have cheddar cheese and mozzarella cheese. And so I'm really, really thankful to be able to have that shelf stable in my pantry at all times. I'm just going to set this aside. I could put it in the fridge, but in an emergency, you wouldn't want to open your fridge, and it does not need to be refrigerated for this amount of time. For this soup, I'm going to be testing out my new Ozark Trail butane stove. Very similar to the Coleman stove that I typically use, but this is just a different brand. I'm going to be using my large soup pot, putting in a can of butane, and I'm going to start with my can of chicken. I'm going to put this in with all of the juices, everything that's inside the can. You can see that the only ingredients in this are chicken and sea salt, so all of the liquid in here is natural broth and juices that came from the chicken, and there will be a little bit of fat that came from the chicken, which is going to be a great addition to the soup. In fact, if you wanted, you could use that fat to start off by sauteing your seasonings. I'm not going to bother with that, but you certainly could. This is a good reminder of why it's really important to make sure you have a manual can opener with your emergency supplies. Sometimes I like to throw a little military style can opener right in the bag with the meals, one in each bag, just in case you don't have a can opener handy when you need it, or if you give this bag to someone who might not have a can opener. And you can just use a spoon to break this chicken up a little bit into more bite-sized pieces. I try not to break it up too much, because I feel like it will break up some more while it's simmering, and I don't want it to completely shred, because I don't like teeny little shreds of chicken. And we can also break this up more as we are stirring it in the pot if we see bigger chunks. Next, I'm going to add my tomato products. I'm starting with the crushed tomatoes. And next, my tomato sauce. I'm going to add my seasonings. And now I'm going to add my chicken broth. But what I'm going to do with this first is I'm going to use it to rinse out my tomato cans, just so that I get all of the tomato that was in those cans into our soup. I just don't like to waste. All right, so now I'm just going to give this a good stir and get the heat on. And this can be pretty high until this comes up to a simmer. I am going to throw a lid on this so that it can come up to temperature a little more quickly, and so we don't lose too much of our liquid to evaporation. All right, so we are just starting to simmer, and it did take just about 12 minutes, almost 12 minutes for this to come up to a simmer, this really big pot. So what I am going to do now is I'm going to stir in my pasta. It's going to cook right in the soup. I'm going to give that a little stir. And I'm going to put the lid back on. I'm going to lower down the heat so that this can just simmer. And this pasta has a cook time of 8 to 10 minutes. So I'm going to check it in probably about 7 to 8 minutes. We want it just shy of being done so we can add the rest of our ingredients. I am going to give this just a couple stirs to make sure that pasta doesn't clump while it's cooking. And break up any bigger pieces of chicken that I see. All right, it's been about 7 minutes, I think. I've been able to maintain a nice simmer with the stove. And I'm going to find a piece of pasta here to test out. It should be almost done, but not quite. I think that is right about where we want it to be. So now I'm going to go ahead and add my dairy ingredients. I'm going to start with the media crema. This one has a nice pop top. Now you can see how nice and thick this is. This is very thick and very rich. I'm going to turn this down a little bit because it's getting pretty bubbly. Start stirring this cream around. This will melt right into it. It takes a few minutes, but not long at all. I'm also going to add my Parmesan cheese. Now, you can either add the whole bottle. It's actually not that much. It's far less than a cup. And the original recipe that I adapted this from called for a cup of freshly shaved Parmesan cheese. So this is not too much, but if you want, you can leave a little bit in the bottle to serve on the top as well. I'll start giving this all a stir. And then all we have to do is make sure that it gets nice and heated through so that it'll melt that mozzarella cheese when we put it on top of the bowl. And we want to make sure that pasta has finished cooking through. And that is all that we need to do. Once that media crema has melted in and the pasta is done, we can dish up a bowl. All right. The soup is nice and creamy, the pasta is tender, and it's nice and piping hot. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off. All right, I'm going to dish up some of this soup. And I'm going to go ahead and take some of this mozzarella cheese that I rehydrated, just a little pinch, and get it on top of the soup so it can start to melt and get all melty and delicious. I'm going to give this just a minute to melt, and then I'm going to go ahead and add a few croutons on the top, which is going to represent the breading that would be on the chicken in a chicken parm. I am going to sprinkle a little bit of the extra Parmesan cheese right on the top, and I'm going to add some croutons. How amazing does that look? All right, let's see if this has cooled off enough to try it. Oh, look at that gooey cheese. That is amazing. I can't believe just, half an hour ago that was freeze-dried cheese. That's delicious. So good. This recipe makes quite a lot of soup. If you have a smaller family, I think you could make a smaller batch by using smaller versions of the same ingredients. What I would use if I was doing a smaller half-size recipe is a regular size can of chicken broth. This is the 14.5 ounce can. And a smaller can of chicken. This is the 12.5 ounce can, so the larger of the two grocery store cans. You could also use a smaller Keystone can of chicken. This is beef. I don't have the small cans of chicken, but this is a 14.5 ounce can of meat, and they do make that in chicken. For the tomato products, I've got the 14.5 ounce can of, these are petite diced tomatoes, Italian style. I believe you can find the crushed tomatoes in this smaller size can, but it's a lot more difficult to find that variety of tomato, the crushed, in this size can, at least where I live. And I think that these diced would actually work really well if you can't find the crushed in this size. And then, of course, I've got the tomato sauce in an 8 ounce can. And this is a 5 ounce can of evaporated milk to stand in for the media crema, or the heavy cream in the original recipe. This is the one thing I'm not totally sold on. I don't think the evaporated milk would be quite as good as the media crema, but this is the only smaller size container that I could really find. And then, of course, a 1 cup or half pint size jar of the pasta. And this is a cute little 1/4 pint container of the mozzarella cheese, the freeze-dried mozzarella cheese. So this is a half a cup. And then you can use the same size container of the Parmesan, because you just might have a little bit left over, which is fine. And same with the croutons. You could use the same size bag. You might be able to find a smaller bag. The croutons, because they're sprinkled on, the end as like a condiment, it's really dependent upon how much you want. Mr. Wicked Prepared likes a lot of croutons on his soup. He said it really makes the soup. And if you have leftovers, that's not a big deal. I actually like to snack on just dried croutons sometimes as a little snack. So you could use them up in that way, or save them for another recipe. I do recommend trying this recipe in the full-size version first, because I haven't tested this with the evaporated milk and stuff. So just to see if you really like the recipe, and then if you decide to cut it down, you can see how close it is. Even if you can't eat the full recipe in one sitting, as long as it's not a power outage situation, you can always refrigerate your leftovers and have lunch for a few days. I'm also planning on making a meal in a jar version of this soup. And the great thing about meals in a jar is that they're very scalable. It's easy to scale them down to serve 1 or 2 people. So keep an eye out for that recipe on the channel in the future. If you need help finding any of the ingredients that I used today, check out the description below the video or the pinned comment for direct links and discount codes whenever I have them. You can also text me if you need any help. Like any recipe, I suggest preparing this meal once and serving it to your family to make sure you like it, since everyone's tastes are different. If you do enjoy it, you can make up several bags to have on the shelf. I have a whole playlist of other meals just like this, so you can easily put together several weeks worth of meals to get you through longer term emergencies or many busy nights, even during non-emergency times. Because one more great thing about meals in a bag, besides how great they are for emergencies, is that they're also great, convenient time savers as well for every day. You don't have to wait for an emergency or a lockdown or a power outage to use these meals. Anytime you need a meal in a hurry, whether you're running late getting home from work, or you forgot to thaw your meat for supper, or you forgot to plug in your crock pot, or whatever the case may be, you can grab one of these bags without even having to think about it. If you need to have your spouse or your teenager fix supper and maybe they're not the chef in the family, this is something they can handle. These meals can also be a great thing to give away to someone who could use a meal, whether it's a young adult child or grandchild who's on their own for the first time, or just a family who could use a little help for whatever reason. Emergency meal kits are one of several tricks that we use that have really improved both our prepping and our everyday life. Check out the playlist down below for more recipes to help you revolutionize your pantry. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me a spoon emoji down in the comments, and check out this playlist next for some more great recipes. I'm Jera with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.